do this.
Welcome, you boxing degenerates. We've got a special guest in the building. Big Steve from the WhatsApp group. What are you saying, Steve?
How you doing? You good, yeah? What's going on, people?
I'm good, man. So yeah, just to give Steve his flowers, Steve's prominent member of the WhatsApp group, even though it's become a little bit more stocks than boxing lately. But yeah, man, what we go back 10 years now?
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while. Used to be old colleagues, but then, stayed in touch. Good mates now.
All right, so give the people a quick intro, man. Like what was the first boxing fight that you went to live? Stuff like that.
Um, it was, the first fight I ever went to was Froch Groves one, but
Yeah,
I didn't know you didn't, I don't think.
just before we met.
Yeah, so that's the first one I went to, and I went with Ricardo and Stefan. You know them as well. But yeah, that's basically that's the first event I went to, and then from then I was hooked, and I was following all the podcasts and started taking a real interest in boxing. But I'd say the real fight that got me into boxing initially, that sparked my interest, was Floyd versus Ricky Hatton in 2007, I think it was. Yeah, that fight got me into boxing, man. Literally, like the 24/7s and all that stuff. Like it was really good.
I think that was probably the best of the 24/7s.
100%, man. Like it was so dramatic. It was everything you want in a fight, right? Like the characters, like how diverse they were. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
From two different backgrounds, stuff like that.
two totally different characters juxtaposed together. Um, but yeah, listen, I know you ain't got all the time in the world, so let's get straight into it, man. Also, just before I forget, done a bit of cheeky white collar stuff yourself.
Yeah, how can I forget that? Yeah. I've had two fights. So, and to be honest, I train. I've started training again. Not competitively, but a little bit of body sparring, but training consistently, like 3 times a week. So yeah, I've had two fights. One fight I won, the other fight was a no contest. We'll leave it there.
Fair dues, man. Fair dues. So yeah, man. AB, tell me your thoughts on the whole sit. What's your thoughts on Alycia Baumgartner popping dirty?
Well, you know that I called this ages ago, right?
It,
And for me, it's not really a surprise, especially seeing how her body's changed so much, like in the last 2 years, especially after who did she beat in the Matchroom stable? What's her name?
Terry Harper with
That's it. After
with
the
world title.
exactly, yeah. So after the Harper fight, like mate, her body's changed so much. And you can just like even her jaw, like there's just little signs that's just so obvious, right? But then also the muscle mass that well, not mass, but the muscle that she's kind of put on in that time. I remember working with a lady actually you'll know this lady as well, but she was a amateur bodybuilder. But she was natural apparently. But she said to me that literally get women that have that have muscles and stuff like that. She was like, literally, they're all on drugs. She said there's no other way for you to develop that kind of muscle because you don't, as a woman, you don't have testosterone.
Hmm.
Um, so like, yeah, even and since then I've met other women that are kind of on the juice as well, and you can just kind of tell, kind of thing. But what did you think? Like, what did you think of it? The whole news.
Same as you, man. Like when you put it in the group, I was like, yeah, I totally agree with that one. Do you know what I mean? Because there's like you say, there's certain fighters where you don't need a test to know. You can tell just from their body definition. But for women, it's even more obvious. Like you say, they don't have the same testosterone ratio, right? And so it's just like I think the word you were probably looking for is not necessarily the size, it's the definition. Do you know what I
That's
mean?
it. Yeah.
Define their muscles are. So she, to me, when I looked at her, she reminded me of like I know you're a bit younger than me, but I don't know if you remember Marion Jones back in the day. That
The
athlete,
sprinter.
yeah, the sprinter exactly, and she was just winning everything, and she was just like she just had dude definitions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
She
it.
had the kind
Yeah.
of arms you would want going on holiday type of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that just looked bait to me. And like you say, it wasn't just like how she kind of came on the scene and beat Terry Harper. Terry Harper was probably quite beatable, right? But it was like you could tell that there wasn't anything that special about her technique. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? but just the athleticism that she had and the way that she would like look like she's getting that box, look like she's getting that box, and then at any moment she could just turn it on, right? And she was just too quick, too powerful. And I think like when it's like that, like it's definitely question marks. And I think the big question is like, when do you think that she got like? Do you think were you suspect of like at the Harper fight when she first got on that Matchroom card, or is it just more recently, or what do you think? Like,
No, for me, it wasn't the Harper fight specifically because I think that's when I found out. That's when I knew who she was. I didn't know who she was before then, right?
hmm,
So that fight, and
yeah.
then I ain't gonna lie, like yeah. So since that fight, obviously I've been following her career, and like I follow
Really?
her on Twitter. I follow her on Twitter. It's not what you think. Um, but yeah, you've just seen her body take shape. And recently I met a woman that's on juice who's in the gym. And yeah, that a
Who said?
telltale sign.
She said she's told you that, or you just?
Yeah, she told me she's on juice because she's a weight, like she's doing weights. But
Hmm,
the telltale sign that you mentioned was how they actually look more manly. That's the sign. Like
hmm.
they actually their bodies actually become more manly. And if you look at her body, like even all the pictures she posts, yeah, like it's very, very masculine. Like it's okay being ripped and in shape as a woman, but there's a feminine kind of like look, and then there's a masculine one, and she's way to the masculine side. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it's funny. So what she got popped for, misterolone,
Mm,
is essentially a testosterone enhancer, right? It's a male fertility drug for people that can't get their things going, basically low testosterone and what have you. And so it completely correlates with what you're saying that it's going to give you more masculine features, right? And yeah, I think probably the Michaela Mayer, you know, when they had that grudge match and they had the whole back and forth going on in the face to face, and they were having this whole catty argument, which I think people that don't follow the sport were just kind of like new to them might have not understood is that Mayer was kind of not giving her props because she's like, where have you come from? Like, you know what I mean? I went to
right.
the Olympics, I did this and that. And then Baumgartner was kind of saying that, you know what I mean? Like you're not giving me my credit, you know, just because you've come through the traditional route that it doesn't, you know what I mean? You're not giving me my credit for the journey that I've been on, kind of thing. And I even at the time thought that that was like she didn't want to compromise the promotion by flat out saying that she was on drugs. But I felt like
Yeah,
Leah was kind of like hinting to that was the point she was making that like you know, nobody knew who you were until the Terry Harper fight. And now all of a sudden, like, look at you, right? You know what I mean? Like, your performance has gone through the roof. So I think, like, pretty much the reason why her performances have just like all of a sudden taken her to the top table is primarily due to the juice. Um,
definitely.
but I suppose it opens up like the broader question as well that like we've had obviously just within the Matchroom stable, we've had the Conor Benn situation, which is still ongoing, you know, even though they were trying to sell it as he's cleared, you know, it's come out that it's not quite as simple as that, even still. You've got a Dillian Whyte situation only like a week ago.
Yeah.
And then now this, like, what's your thoughts on, you know, I suppose the bigger picture, but also with, you know, Matchroom in general?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking it's kind of convenient that when Matchroom kind of went to war with the boxing yeah, the boxing federation of the UK, when they went to war with them over Conor
The
Benn,
British Boxing Border Control.
yeah, border control, that's it, thanks. It's interesting now that people are getting popped. Like they've had two fighters popped since then. So it makes you wonder if they. I mean, I've got nothing to base this on. This is all just me speculating in my mind. Like, but I'm just thinking like, because remember how many there's been a lot of tests that we haven't known about that's been dealt with in
Right.
the back end, right? Where they have a hearing and then whoever makes an excuse and then it doesn't go public, right? But since the whole Conor Benn thing, you can tell like the British Border Control are pissed off with Eddie Hearn and they're kind of going to war with him. So I think it's interesting now that they're getting popped a bit more. I wouldn't be surprised if like now they're like kind of going nuclear on Matchroom and just being like, you know, fuck it. Like every time someone pops, we're gonna put it out there. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like that was probably one of the biggest mistakes Eddie did with the whole Conor Benn thing. Like it was one of them ones where he shouldn't have pushed it really. He should have just left it as it is. But you know, because ultimately he was pushing for the outcome that he didn't get anyway, right? He was pushing to keep the fight on, and the fight ended up getting cancelled. So he should have just cancelled it beforehand, and he would have at least got credit for cancelling it early. But where he was pushing and pushing and pushing it, you know, the greed, the short-term thinking, I think now is starting to affect them in the long term. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest problems with Matchroom. In fact, Hatman, one of my favorite commentators, he was saying how with Matchroom, they're very short term. They don't think long term at all. Like every decision they think is very short term, and also they're just, I guess they're trade as accountancy, right? They are actual, like Barry Hearn is a chartered accountant, so
Mm.
you know I think number one is always about the numbers for them, but sometimes it's not always about the numbers. Do you know what I mean? I think they made the mistake here, right? Like typical example, you know, the show's not going to happen. Yeah, you're going to lose money, but you know, there's nothing you can do about it. But no, because of the numbers, they pushed for it and it's gone the wrong way, and now it's affecting them in the long term. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I think Matchroom's aggressive style of trying to get what they want, right, and pushing through. I think maybe not only is that robbed the governing bodies up the wrong way, but I think it's also the media as well, right? And a lot of these boxing journalists like Dan Raphael, who, for example, broke the story with Baumgartner, I feel like the boxing media, a lot of them, especially the US based ones, they kind of don't have that affinity towards Matchroom in the way that certain outlets over here, they kind of have them in their pocket, right? And so I feel like people almost can't wait to release a Matchroom story, whereas I think it could be possible that other ones, you know, get, especially in America, get swept under the rug, right?
Mm,
And I think it's a complicated situation because it depends on who you get caught by. So if you get caught by UCAD, right, as part of the BBFC standard testing for British license holders, then their version of confidential means that even the person that you're fighting, right, doesn't get made aware of it, vis-a-vis the Dillian Whyte Oscar Rivas situation, where Rivas didn't even know that Whyte had popped a test, and Whyte had gone and had a hearing and everything like the week of the fight, right? So things like that, it's hard for us to find out about until we absolutely need to. And then when you've got these voluntary testing protocols from the likes of VADA and Drug Free Sport, who are the agency that just popped Baumgartner, these are contractual arrangements where it's down to the parties of the contract, right? And so where you have a situation where Dillian Whyte and Anthony Joshua didn't want to go ahead with the fight, it gets leaked like that because there is no parties have got a vested interest in keeping it under wraps. But then where you have a situation with the VADA testing for Conor Benn and Eubank, so Eubank and his promoter Sauerland wanted to keep the fight going, and therefore
true,
the
true.
vested
Yeah.
interest for both parties, you know, to keep it under wraps. So, but I think it's definitely the case where, especially, you know, the American media, because of the brash nature of Eddie and Matchroom, the way they kind of spoken about how the sport was run on that side of the pond, the way they've started to bully the British Boxing Board of Control, you know, other than like outlets like IFL or a couple of others that, you know, depend on Eddie, I think that definitely the way that they go about their business, people kind of almost can't wait for their downfall. They've kind of come
Yeah.
from the young upstart to the ones that people want to see fail. But I think the other thing that I just want to share, I suppose, as a final thought, is that as far as Matchroom specifically go, like as fans, we probably owe them a credit because the reason why they're getting fighters caught is because they're doing the most testing, right? And if you're doing the most testing, you're going to get the, like, as fight fans, all we can ask for is for people to get caught, right? So you can't necessarily have any ill will to the people who are stumping up the money to make sure that things get tested. Because I feel like a lot of PBC fights, you know, even at the world title level, there isn't really that testing going on.
No, that's all well and good, but I think obviously the problem with that, it's all well and good coming out and saying that now for Matchroom, but when you've handled when you handled the Conor Benn situation the way you did, it massively devalues that statement that, oh, actually we're the only ones testing it. Yeah, they are technically, but you know, look at how you handled that situation, right? It was appalling, it was disgraceful, it was such a bad look for boxing, and it was so obvious that it was about greed. But it looks like they've learned from it, so like that's, you know, there's no point going on and on about it.
Yeah, so I suppose you make a good point because it is a massive contradiction, isn't it? Because it seems like we want to do the most testing and we want credit for being the promoters doing the most testing, right? But the way that we deal with it is completely different depending on whether it's our man, you know what I mean, or our woman in this case that we put investment into getting caught, you know. So for example, if it's a Dillian Whyte who's a free agent, you know, who we worked with in the past, but at the moment, you know, we don't have him under long-term contract, then the fight gets cancelled and now you're on your own, right, to prove your innocence. But like you say, when it's been someone like a Conor Benn or probably now Alycia Baumgardner, someone who they've put a lot of investment into, right, and they have under long-term contract, it's like they don't want to stick to, you know, what should be the due process. They want to try and bully whoever they can and just, you know what I mean, get.
Yeah, they blur the lines, don't they? Like they change it for depending on the fighter, right? If it's a high profile fighter in their stable, then yeah, they're gonna like find a way around. They're gonna change the language. But if it's like a Dillian White, when you don't really need it, see you later. We can easily cancel it, and then we're gonna say like, oh, we're the ones testing a lot. So it's a little bit of semantics as well, but yeah, I guess technically they are testing the most, so that they are right. But you know, if you look at it holistically, also like they are kind of talking a lot of shit as well. Like you know what they're like in it. But
Yeah,
yeah, they're
and you can
promoters, I
imagine.
suppose.
I don't think we have a clear-cut example of this, unless we go back to the Jarrell Miller situation, right? But
Mm.
I think it would definitely be the case that if there was another Miller situation where someone's been brought in as an opponent, yeah, and they get popped, then all of a sudden you're guilty of sin and you should be banned for life and it's disgusting. And what if Joshua died in the ring and all I mean, all this
Exactly.
bullshit,
Exactly.
yeah. But when
Exactly.
Conor Benn's doping or Baumgartner's doping, right? You know, due process and you know
It's
they
not even a. The thing is, when they're doping, it's not even a doping. They're like adverse finding. They don't even say failure, right? Like it's an adverse finding, right? It's a fail, bro. It's an L.
and the bullshit just starts straight away. Like I've heard Eddie talking about, you know, she passed the test like 2 days later, and like who gives a
Oh,
fuck,
what?
bro?
Like,
That's not how testing works, man. It's not like, oh, well, you know what I mean? Like we will
well,
allow
that's all right then.
what, you know
Forget that other
what
says.
I mean?
Like, it's yeah. But even the whole Conor Ben situation, like, I know. Sorry to keep going back to it, but mate, it's
Yeah.
just. But the thing is, if we speak frankly, we know that in the game, loads and loads of people are on it. Like, it's just the way it is. Like even from the small training that I do, and I've had a little bit of training, a little bit of sparring, etc. I know how hard it is, even competing at like the lowest level, like white collar. I know how hard it is to do that as a pro, right? Day in, day out, like trying to do everything correct. And even then, you still need to get lucky with like injuries and stuff like that, right? So if you can take something that can help with, you know, having a bit more energy or helping you cut weight, especially when you're cutting weight as well, because that's when, like, imagine you're going to the gym, your body's already depleted, you're tired. Now you're restricting your calories, right? And
Mm.
then you've got to do a full training session, a full day of sparring, right? So if a coach comes to you and says, look, take this will help you to lose weight. Because even if you look at Canelo, what did he get popped on? Was clenbuterol, I think it was,
Yeah.
and that helped with weight, right? Um, and he was fighting at, I think it was 160, was it 160 at the time or 168?
What at the time he was, yeah, he was fighting at 160.
Exactly. So it's just these little, it's a lot of the times it's just something to give you that little edge, right? That will just help you that little bit more. So I think, to be honest, a vast majority of people are on it, in my opinion, like that. I still think that's the case, right? I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And like, I mean, I'm someone that didn't even make it to the white to the level where I could have a white collar fight, but just training in an amateur gym and you know, seeing how, like you say, how slow the rate of progression is, right? And how when you control all the controllables, it still takes a long time to step up your
Mm,
level, right? And so I was training in Finchley ABC for about 3 years and you know, when you see guys like Connor Benn or Alycia Baumgardner, and like not only are they stepping up their level of opposition, right?
mm,
And then not only are they getting like knockouts when before they you know they were going to points, right? So like your power stepped up, your level of opposition has stepped up, and then often you're moving up weight classes to do all of those things at the same time. It's like not possible. Do you know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
So it's like you could step up your level of opposition, sure, but then you're probably gonna start going to points, right? You might be able to knock down a lower level, right?
yeah.
But to step up your level of opposition, to step up your weight class, and to be wiping people out, like it doesn't happen. Do you know what I mean? Like in that,
Mate, trust me, bro. Trust me. Because and even with like the whole Conor Benn thing, what was like the indicators were just so many red flags. Like not just like one or two, so many red flags where you're just like, oh my day. And this guy, yeah, allegedly he didn't, but come on, like there were so many red flags, like you were saying, the knockouts, like compared to where he was before to where he is now, like I mean, you have to take into consideration that he is training day in, day out. He's got, the best trainers, he's got nutritionists, he's got all that stuff as well. So that obviously makes a change. But mate, like all the signs, like even there was, do you remember how long it took him to sign up to the um WBC's clean boxing program thing? And
yeah,
they actually took him out of the rankings and then he just did it and he was like, oh yeah, I forgot, that kind of thing. And then that doctor, when he when he
yeah,
mysteriously disappeared, like just so many signs, right?
yeah.
But yeah, I think it's rife in the game. I don't know what the solution is, to be honest, because I think even if you did put like a lifetime ban or whatever, I'm sure it would deter some people, but you're still going to get people doing it because if people can get away with it now, they're still going to do it because there's so much money on the line, right? And I think that's the problem, really.
Yeah. I mean, I think on the solution, I did a video about this. It didn't get many views, but I might put another link up or something if people want to click on it. For me, I feel like you have to really look at it as a business if you want to realistically get a solution. I think trying to do the whole like governance way of doing things, like the whole governing bodies or sanctioning bodies, like that's not going to get anywhere. Like these organizations, they don't have a lot of money, and the money that they do get comes ultimately from the industry. So
Mm,
what money is coming, if you're getting paid by promoters and boxers, yeah, then it's not within your interest, right, to use the little money that you have to clamp down on promoters and boxers, right? So personally, I think like that is a bit of a red herring, right? I think pragmatically, if you look at boxing as a business and as a supply chain, right? Then you have the boxers who are like, I mean, to think about in like manufacturing terms, they're the ones in the sweatshop, right? They're creating the product, right? But ultimately, like the top of the supply chain that sells it to the end consumer is the broadcaster, right? And
mm,
other than Saudi, which is kind of like a different model for most of boxing until the Saudis get involved, right? It's the broadcaster money, right? That is like where the vast majority of the money comes from, right? You make some money off the gate, but these pay-per-view fights, especially, the vast majority of the purses is coming from the broadcaster. So personally, I think if the broadcasters come together and create a charter like where TNT, Sky, The Zone, Showtime, ESPN, right, come and agree and say that look, anything with a world title, right, and anything that's pay-per-view, either or, right? Then there has to be 12 weeks worth of testing, because like we have a responsibility to our viewers that, you know, people die in boxing, right? So if we're showing something for, then, or if we're selling something, especially if we're charging you pay-per-view money, right, let alone your subscription or whatnot, like, then, you know, you have to know what you're watching. And so if the broadcasters take a stand and say, we don't buy this product, right, from the promoters, whether you are a host promoter or whether we're buying content, you know, the same way that Sky sometimes will buy like a top rank show or something like that, you know, like with Valdez and Navarrete. If the broadcasters take a stand and say that, look, unless there's 12 weeks testing, and even maybe even taking a step further, right, even though that would be a good start, if they take a step further and say, you know, any therapeutic use exemptions, right, which is a whole other kettle of fucking shit, right, have to be disclosed, right, to the public. So whatever you're taking because you got this and that injury, right, the public have to know about it, or we don't buy the fight. That's the only way that you can make a dramatic difference.
Yeah.
That
No,
was a
I agree.
monologue, but yeah, I mean, that
No,
was,
no, no, I agree. No, I watched that video. It's definitely a good point. But I think it comes back to like, see, like how you were saying about governing bodies and like what's really incentivizing them to do that. Same with that, the broadcasters, like they don't, I don't know, they're not really in, because even it's difficult to get broadcasters to work together anyway, like just in general.
yeah, I mean, I suppose, okay, so I suppose there's a couple of different questions there, right? So one is what's incentivizing them to do it, and the other is like what's incentivizing them to work together. The work together doesn't necessarily have to be a thing, you know. Me as an idealist, it'd be good if they all signed up to it, but even if like one by one, right, they were to just insist on it, or even like it kind of relates to your first question, what's in their interest to do it. I feel like because they're the ones who are essentially selling the end product to the consumer, right? Which is us. We're the ones that, you know, pay whatever we pay for the zone, and the rest of them. We're the ones that ultimately pay for the pay-per-views, right? I feel like it would help consumers want to actually come to boxing. I think it would actually help their bottom line with subscriber numbers and pay-per-view numbers if because I feel like it's turning people away from the sport, right? I feel like if consumers know that what I'm watching is a clean sport, right, and this is genuinely equal and fair combat, then it's gonna like, because there are people, you know, more on the kind of, it's hard for us to, I suppose, to wrap our heads around because we're hardcore into the sport, right? But I think there are casuals that are turned away for boxing partly because, you know, it's violent by nature and these doping stories keep on coming out. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's the same reason why I like, okay, it's not the only reason, but it's like there are things like the athletics and that, which I don't really give a shit about anymore, and I used to when I was a kid, because I just feel like everyone's doping. Like, what is the point? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like cycling, isn't it?
I
Yeah.
feel like the broadcasters, do you know what I mean? Like, it would be in their commercial interest. Do you know what I mean? To have this to sell to the public.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's a fair point, man. It's a fair point. It's an interesting idea for sure. I guess also there's a cost to it as well. Like, you know, testing is expensive as well. So
Yeah,
that's probably
yeah.
another factor. Budget's
That's
already
what I'm
on the
saying. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's for like world title fights or pay-per-views, because with those that level of fights, there's enough money. Do you know what I mean
yeah,
to do
yeah,
it? And also, it's like anything that like if your business volumes increase, then like the unit cost decreases, right? So if they go into drug-free sport or to VADA and saying, okay, our broadcasters insisted every world title, every pay-per-view has to be, do you know what I mean, 12 weeks. So we need now like double the number of tests done, right? You can demand a better unit price, surely. Do you know what I mean? If you're buying double, if anything, from anyone, you can ask for a better price on it because, do you know what I mean? You like, if you think about drug-free sport, they're doing like NBA, NFL, like you think like the NBA, they play like over 80 games, do you know what I mean, in a season.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean? They're playing 2-3 times a week, bro. So
yeah,
like, I'm sure that like they get a much better price than Matchroom get. Do you know what I'm saying? Because
Exactly. Yeah. True. True.
they're a high priority client. Do you know what I'm saying? Whereas I feel like a lot of these I feel like I'm making this up, right? I don't know none of this. I'm just talking out of my body, right? But I think a lot of these testing agencies, in some ways, they probably don't even want like boxing promoters' business, because like when they do their job and find someone, now all of a sudden you want to ask about
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Do you know what
Exactly.
I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like
You
you
want to
come
like.
along once or
Yeah.
twice a year. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You want us to
Yeah.
do
It's
the
true.
testing, and then when we find someone, like you start threatening us with shit. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Get the lawyers in, and then like, yeah, you start questioning the program process, and then you send in 600-page documents, to, to criticize them. Yeah, okay. I guess all right. Let me quickly ask you this before I cut. What about? So there's a lot of dialogue at the moment about how long it's taken for Matchroom to kind of like produce the results, right? So I think it was taken before the fight, and then I think it came out like 9 days afterwards or something, which is a bit ridiculous. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, so I was watching an interview this morning with Eddie saying that the time they took them to get the result from the Baumgardner failing was just under 4 weeks, right? So it was like 3 days before the fight, the Linodatu fight, and then they've just found out last Thursday, and so it was just under 4 weeks. And I think with the Dylan Whyte situation, it was closer to 3 weeks, right? Different testing agency. But in general, I think what he had to say was that's just how long the agencies take, right? And it's not ideal, but it is what it is. It's not like something that's within Matchroom's control. So, with
Do you
Didier,
believe that though? Obviously, he's going to say that, but do you believe that? Because
I
I don't
do.
know. You do.
I
What do you
do,
think?
because like
Okay.
he's kind of been quite transparent that and obviously that wasn't the case with the Conor Benn situation, right? So it's different for
Mm,
different situations. We we
yeah.
we know for a fact that they knew about that for months, and it was kept under wraps because both parties to the contract, right, both promotional teams, both fighters wanted the fight to continue. But I think when it's a situation where either the fight's already taken place, like Baumgardner, or one of the parties to the contract doesn't want the fight to continue, there things come out. But I do believe that it does take 3 to 4 weeks for the testing agencies to come back to them. That's not to say that I think it'd be impossible, right? If you were to pay enough money, or
Yeah.
you are an important enough client, right, for them to speed it up. I
Yeah.
absolutely think that is possible. I absolutely think that, there's probably other clients that do get their results back quicker. But if you're
Yeah.
comes along, 3 or 4 times a year and is a fucking ball ache, every time we find somebody, like, then obviously they're going to want to cross their I's and dot their T's. And every time there's a positive test, they double, triple check it, whatever.
Yeah.
I
True.
think partly that's probably why it takes so long.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, bro. That makes a lot of sense. And it's not as if they've got other tests that they're running, consistently. So yeah, that makes sense. Maybe it's just a logistical thing anyway. So yeah, no, fair. There's not much they can do about that. And again, it probably comes back again to how much they're paying for their tests as well. So yeah, so yeah, no, that's convinced me otherwise.
I think
Um,
I know you need to go, but I think like other than these things that would help, the only real solution is for some billionaire like, I don't know, maybe Zuckerberg or Musk to come along, right, and create the clean boxing championships where there's just zero tolerance, like for anything, like the tiniest thing, yeah, you are done forever. And but they pay so much money, and it pays so much more than like traditional boxing as we think of it, that the incentive to cheat just becomes removed. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's true, it's true. Like but I mean, like the odds of that happening, do you know what I mean?
So,
It would be nice. Or the other alternative is you just let them do it. Everyone's allowed to
yeah,
choose, I
you have
guess.
two
But
tiers.
then, but then that's more
You have
dangerous,
a
isn't it?
two-tier system. Do you know what I mean? But I mean, yeah. Also, I mean, with the Saudis, like, I mean, the Saudis are pretty much that, right? They got so much money. Why don't they use their money for the good? Like, why don't they say, look, we're gonna pay the most money. Like no other boxers can get this. But you know, these are our rules. Like if you've ever been popped for anything, yeah,
Mm.
you can't compete. You know, in Saudi.
Then there'll be no boxers left.
I mean, well, there will be no dirty boxers left because everyone wants the big money, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, it's a bit like that. I mean, they could do it if they wanted to. They've got the dough.
can do anything, man. The man.
All right, appreciate it, Steve. I know you need to run. Hopefully have you back on the channel soon, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, bro. It'll be great to come back on one day.
Peace.
All right, man. Laters, bro.